Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Um, I'm Erin. I don't know if I've met many of you, but I am the sales director here at Atlantis, and I will be working with Mark today for us to walk through our webinar. Our webinar today is to talk about transforming your organization with smarter records management. And the reason why we picked this topic is because we have been talking in the past couple of months with several clients and organizations that are truly trying to put this into their priorities and planning for next year. So we thought it was a perfect time to go through this. We know there's a lot of different questions, and we built that into today's presentation. So it will be a little bit of high level and a mix of things just to address this overall records management topic that we've been working through in the past couple months. So before we get started, we're gonna do a little bit of housekeeping, just some details for today. Number one is the session is recorded. So just wanted to let you know, and if you want a copy, we will be able to provide a copy of this recording at the end. So that will be something available to you. This is not an interactive webinar. We have things we want to get through, but please ask your questions as you have them in the chat so that at the end we can go back through and make sure that all your questions are addressed. And if we don't have time, we'll make sure to answer them individually, but be putting your questions in the chat as it goes. Feel free to do that. And the last thing is that you will get polls throughout the webinar. We do want to see your answers. We do want to see how how things are progressing and the things that come up through the polls. Please respond. It's super helpful for us to know your thoughts through the voting. Okay, so let's get into today's presentation. We are going to be talking today about the risks and the challenges of poor records management. This is something that everybody understands, but we're going to dive into a little bit more deeper with Mark and going through it. Records management assessments and how they set the stage. We really believe as a company, Atlantis does, really making sure that we build your growth knowing that you have a strong foundation. So strong foundational practices is really important to us. So we set you up for modernization and success moving forward. So going to address that today. And then you're also going to see a light demo so we can show you some of the purview, some of the tricks and tips on how to kickstart your journey into records management. Okay, so let me introduce Mark. He's going to be today's speaker, and Mark, I'll let you give a little intro about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm Mark. I've been working in IT for about 12 years, ever since M365 came around. I won't read the whole thing off to you, but if you want to read all about me, you can find me on LinkedIn, etc.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so let's dive in. We want to make sure we all are on the same page with what we're talking about. So I think a good place to start is just what is records management?
Yeah, so records management that we're talking about today is essentially how an organization handles its critical data throughout the life cycle. And it's more than just tools and technology. It's a strategy that covers everything from creating and storing records to accessing and then eventually disposing them. No matter where a company stands in terms of maturity, good records management starts with understanding what is currently in place. That means assessing existing practices, pinpointing what's working well, and also identifying the gaps which are causing inefficiencies or even security risks. And by taking this approach, organizations can address issues like data leaks, they can streamline operations, and ultimately build a system that adheres to compliance standards and keeps sensitive information safe. It's about creating a solid foundation that not only protects an organization, but helps it thrive.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like one of the things that immediately comes up in the conversations I have, and again, I'm having more of the primary conversations getting started with addressing records management. But one of the things I hear often is like, what are some of the benefits to the organization? Like what makes this worth the investment, like for the business to really lean into this as a priority, especially in moving forward in 2025?
Yeah, that's a super common concern, Aaron. A lot of people think that records management is something that just happens in the background, but when it's done right, the benefits are very real. First off, there's compliance and risk mitigation. For example, in 2023, IBM found that the average cost of a data breach was 4.5 million. Um, Fine definitions for GDPR, they start at 10 million euros. And the words whichever is higher appears throughout those fine definitions. Secondly, efficiency. Like improving records classification can have cut document retrieval time in half. Reducing data redundancy and optimizing storage, that's going to cut data costs. Having one source of truth where your records are rather than having them duplicated or scattered about. And these sorts of things lead to better and more informed decision making. One of the things that's kind of up and coming, and it's one of those topics that we're starting to hear a lot more about, is Copilot. And if your data is not secure and your records aren't managed properly, Copilot, one of its strengths is helping surface data. But if it's surfacing data that you don't necessarily want your employees to see, then it's not very useful. You don't want to turn it on if you don't have those records secured. So putting in an upfront effort to secure and manage your records helps enable kind of these next steps with Copilot as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like for Canadian organizations, specifically for the ones that we are talking about moving to Copilot, one of the things that comes up is this issue around data compliance. So we know that it's critical, but making these assessments to avoid these hefty, the penalties. What are your thoughts on that? Like, is that a huge part of what we'd be addressing?
Yeah, like data compliance is a huge responsibility for Canadian organizations and organizations everywhere. And records management is kind of the keystone for meeting those compliance standards or compliance requirements. Like in Canada, for example, businesses have to keep tax records for 7 years. And in other circumstances, like charities, sports organizations, data has to be kept within inside Canada, and data residency is also important. And having a system in place that enforces these sorts of policies is key to staying compliant. Like for example, prevents accidental deletion, especially when non-compliance can lead to consequences like fines, legal actions, more audits from the CRA, uh, reputational damage, and all of these things bundled up, that'll drain lots of time and resources.
Yeah. So hopefully that gives like some of the things that come up um, of just like why this is an important topic, why we want to support you on it. So if like so we have let's say we have somebody and they're ready to get started, they've heard some of the reasons why this is important. What are some like building an effective strategy? What are some things we would recommend starting with?
The first thing you need to do is a thorough assessment. What does your current data landscape look like? Where is it? What procedures are in place? What procedures should be in place for the various compliance standards that organizations are aiming towards? And starting from these questions, we can fill in a roadmap between what is existing and what the future state looks like. And part of a records management assessment is also conducting a technology audit, making sure that the tools that are being used align with the compliance requirements and can support long-term goals. Like if you're using outdated technologies like OpenText or Alfresco or even basic file shares, tightening compliance with modern technology should be a priority. And by addressing these foundational elements, organizations can create a sustainable and effective records management strategy that meets both the current needs as well as future needs as companies and organizations grow.
Yes. Okay, no, and I'm thinking about what you said about the open text. We do have a lot of clients. Those have been conversations we've had with clients before, moving them from those kinds of systems into M365 for security, for modernization, for a better experience. So that sounds obviously really familiar from my side. What is what would our process be? So we've established assessment. We want to understand current state. We know why we're looking at an assessment. What would be next? What is the next step in our process?
Yeah, so after that assessment and figuring out where things are, it's discovery, like finding the actual data, digging into the files, finding the known locations where you know, hey, records are stored in this finance folder, but maybe you don't know that some people are storing things that should be records in their OneDrives or their personal file shares. And this discovery involves mapping where all of the records exist within an organization, both the digital records as well as the physical records. This could involve scanning file servers, email archives, cloud storage platforms, and identifying documents, records, emails that are stored correctly, as well as the ones that are being stored incorrectly.
Yeah. I love that you said both digital and physical because I think that's come up before. And I think that that discovery mapping where all the records exist is a really important call out for both digital and physical because that will it sounds like that's sort of how we identify everything. So what after we identify the records, what both the physical and the digital, what comes after that?
Yes, once the records are identified, we know where they are. It's classifying them and organizing them, storing them in the right place, getting them out of those wrong places, getting rid of the shadow IT that's involved. Um, and we can classify records using retention labels and sensitivity labels, excuse me, either manually or by setting up and training automatic classifiers. And just for a little more context, a label is a tag or a piece of metadata that lives on a document throughout its life cycle and cannot be removed by end users. Retention labels are the type of metadata tags that indicate how long a document should be retained and or how it should be disposed of. Whether that involves a review cycle at the end or just deleted after 7 years or whatever that may be. Sensitivity labels, on the other hand, determine the level of protection or confidentiality a document needs. So once these retention and sensitivity labels are defined, they can be applied to individual items, whether that be an email or a file, a group of items like a SharePoint library, or an entire SharePoint site, or specific email inboxes, and all after this tagging is in there, they can be easily searched, retrieved, and managed. And retention, it's not just about keeping documents for a set amount of time and then deleting them. It's about aligning with the legal, regulatory, and operational requirements to determine specific types of records, how long they should be kept, and what should be done at the end of that life cycle. This helps ensure that critical records are available when needed, while outdated records are securely disposed of to both reduce risk and storage costs. One example is in healthcare, patient records must be kept for like a specified period, but non-critical administrative records might only need to be retained for a much shorter period of time. And by implementing retention scheduling, an organization can ensure compliance without holding on to unnecessary data.
Yeah, I think for me, like when I'm talking to some of the healthcare clients we've had, one of the things that comes up is just, this sort of mental block of like, well, if we do this, these policies are changing, the requirements are changing, legal, regulatory, operational requirements. Like, how do they keep up with that? Is that something? I think one of the things that I have heard a couple times is if we go in and we do this assessment, if we go in and look at all this, the tagging and what you were saying, tagging, looking at retention scheduling, do we do this like every year? Is this like a 5-year thing? What is your response to something like that?
Yeah, like absolutely. keeping retention policies up to date doesn't have to be this ongoing process. Having good dashboards and reporting that keep you informed on updates to regulatory standards and what that means for your data is going to take a lot of the legwork out of reviewing changing policies as government regulations or certain compliance standards get updated. You don't need to have a team of lawyers review them when you've got this automatic management in place from, say, the Microsoft side of things with Purview. I'll dive more of that into that more during the demo, though.
Okay. So that to be super clear, so once they do this, like if they did the assessment and they got organized, and they won't have to continue to do this process. They really will do it once, set themselves up for success using a tool like Purview, and then, like I think you said, like monitor it and just keep it so that you're keeping an eye on it. But you want them to do the big lift essentially more than once. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you're only going to have to do the big lift and the big classification and setting up the trainable classifiers once.
Once. Yes.
It's just monitoring after that, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, I think that moving to the demo makes sense for showing some of how this works. To see an example, do we want to jump into the demo?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just get set up and get my screen share ready. Yeah, so we'll dive into a few things in the demo. We're going to look at the compliance manager in Purview and built-in standards assessment, which is the first step to aligning with the standard. We're going to add a label to the file plan. We're going to publish the labels to a policy. Then we're going to apply the labels to content, and then take a quick overview of the Data Explorer where we can look through data with different tags. All right, so let me share my screen here. All right, hopefully everybody can see that now. Privacy statement. So we're just going to move this thing out. The Teams thing's in the way a little bit. All right, can everybody see my screen? Yes, no?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can.
Perfect.
And we're getting thumbs up. So I think that's a yes.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go to just in the Microsoft Purview compliance portal, we can go into assessments. And this is a little bit different than kind of the greater records management assessment, where we're looking at where your records are and what they should be and what policies are in place, like we talked about earlier. This is an assessment once your data is moved and in place and we're starting down that track. We can choose an assessment based on a specific compliance standard. Microsoft Purview is one of the slower loading things in Microsoft, so just bear with me while we watch bars go across the screen. I think there's a poll up. If everybody hasn't responded, definitely respond to that one. Any second now. Perfect. So let's look at the assessments and and it's not loading, so we're just going to add an assessment. So if we wanted to add an assessment, it's super easy. You would just pick from the list. There's 385 just kind of start with. Everything from the Australia, or if we look for PIP for the Canadian Personal Information Protection acts. There's two different ones. One's for electronic data, one's for not. And then we can just add it. It'll show when it's created. You can give it a name. I'm going to call this one pip2. We can add it to a group or create a new group. Which services are going to be involved. You can add new services. And then we'll create this assessment. And once it's created, it's going to start looking through all the records that have been identified and finding out if you're in compliance with this particular assessment. And again, it's very slow loading.
Very on brand for records management.
Yeah. Okay. And once it's loaded, it'll start listing off your improvement actions. So what can be done to bring your compliance score up? Microsoft handles a good chunk of things and does a lot of things automatically for you, which is super nice. And on the other hand, there's some actions that need to be taken by organizations to get that compliance score up. And a compliance score within Microsoft Purview is not necessarily an arbitrary number, but each thing that you do to advance your records management gives you some points. So once this loads, I can show you what the compliance score looks like. Yeah, smokes. So not doing super great in our demo tenant for compliance. We're only at 51%, which 10,000 out of 20,000 points achieved. And it can show you some key improvement actions like setting up DLP policies or disabling Chrome plugins, things like that. You can view all of them and see what assessment they're rated against. So if I want to filter by regulation, let's filter by the Canadian Privacy Act regulations. And go like this. And it'll refilter with all our improvement actions. And this makes it really easy to kind of go from picking a standard to knowing what needs to be done next. When this does load, one of the actions that's going to be listed here is to create labels. But lots and lots of improvement actions, especially with that low score. Setting reviewing file and folder activity, for example, or creating an access review of groups and applications. But lots and lots and lots of stuff came up for the data protection baseline, as well as the Canadian Personal Information Protection Acts. All right, so next step is we're going to add a label to the file plan. So just those labels that we talked about earlier, we can create a retention label. So this is going to be called demo number 3, DDSC. You add a little bit of data about it. You can add reference IDs or business functions like finance, financial planning, things like that. So we're going to choose finance with the category administration. I'm not going to choose a subcategory or an authority type, but we are going to choose a provision, and it's going to be Sarbanes-Oxley is the file plan this is going to be under. And these are all automatically loaded. Like I didn't add the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 in here. It's just part of the general compliance stuff that's included in Purview. Then we can define the label settings next. Like, are we retaining items forever or a specific period? Are we changing the label after a certain amount of time, or are we just putting on a label so it's tagged and people know what kind of classification it has? In this case, it's going to be a retention label, so we're going to define it for a specific period, and it's Sarbanes-Oxley, so we're going to keep it for, I don't know, let's say 10 years. I'm not up to date on the SOX, so forgive me. And start the retention period when the item is last modified. We're going to choose. And then during the retention period, we can retain them even if a user deletes them, or we can mark items as a record, which will lock the record. All right. What happens after the retention period? Again, these are nice, easy click through next wizards where you can, start a disposition review. Are we ready to delete it? Just delete it automatically. We could run Power Automate workflow, or just change the label to this has been held for 10 years, but we want to keep it for another 5 just in case. In this case, we're going to just delete them automatically. Quick review of it, and then you can create the label. If you're going to create the label, don't use special characters.
Real-time learning.
Real-time learning, yeah. Haven't tried to use a special character before, but here we are. Perfect. So you can now publish the label, so it's just available for everybody. It may take up to 7 days after it's published to show up everywhere. You can auto apply it to specific content, or you can do nothing and publish it later. Let's go with done. And now it's going to go into publish, which is the next tab here. And in this case, I'm just going to cancel this and start a new one for everybody. Let's say we wanted to publish these labels now that we've got them. We can choose what label we want to publish or labels. This one's going to be demo label and demo label 3. I also want to add some finance labels into here for reports and workbooks. And then it will show you what labels you've added to publish. Admin units is part of the policy scope. For example, different departments or different branches of the company would be an administrative unit, and this would mean that they have a different document records manager or a point person for document for records management. The scope, that's going to be where these labels can be applied. Whether it's adaptive and you can just use search properties, like if a SharePoint site has the word finance in the title, then we can automatically make it available there. Or you can choose static and then choose either all locations or specific locations, like if you want to choose specific mailboxes, or if you wanted to choose specific SharePoint sites or OneDrive accounts. Then it would just make it available in those places. Name your policy. It's going to be policy 13. And then here's where it's going to tell you that the labels will be available in a week. Quick description of everything, and then you submit it. Then it's going to go through the publishing process and start publishing it. So we won't wait for this bar to go across, and probably don't want to keep everybody for a week to watch this specific one apply and become available. So now let's just go to one of the demo libraries that we have set up. There's a couple things in here for the Privacy Act or a Microsoft software agreement or our very serious blog post. So you can apply these at a library level, a record level. I'm not going to go into the automatic stuff today, but just more the simple, direct application to files or a group of files. Um, so if you're familiar with SharePoint, it'll just be where you edit the properties. You can just go apply a label. It's all built in and synced automatically. It can take up to a week for those new ones, but you don't need to publish. You don't need to integrate systems. It's just pre-integrated with the Microsoft 365 environment. This very serious blog post, we're going to call it a reference material. And then it may give you a warning if you need to lock it first to apply a certain one. And then it'll just save it automatically. So now this very serious blog post, if I try to delete it, it'll tell you that this operation has been disabled by a policy. And it's that policy that we just applied to it. So can't delete items. And that's one of the big things, right? That's the retention we're talking about. So very brief demo, just showing a couple of the pieces. Obviously, this is a massive topic that we could probably talk about for 4 or 5 hours just to show all of the ins and outs of Purview and its integration with Microsoft and all the different ways to use it. But this is just kind of the starting point to give everybody a little toe in the water.
Mark, one of the questions that I think is relevant to this specifically that we're getting is this an out of the box for Purview? Is any of this customized? Just for understanding what we're showing them from the demo perspective.
Yeah, so everything that we did today is out of the box. There's no crazy customizations on here. It's other than, the custom labels, but a lot of the labels are built in and included. So you do have that bucket of resources already available. So you don't have to go and create hundreds of labels for all your different files types. A lot of them are already included when you add an assessment or get into Purview just by default, like the financial workbooks one, for example, that we showed. That's just built in. Nobody added that. It's just there and ready to use.
Perfect. A couple more questions about the demo, I think, since we're in here, I'll ask them now. So what do we know the license, the Microsoft license needed to use these features in the demo? Do we know that?
Yeah, so because this demo is very simple, you'll just need an E5 security and compliance license for the users that are going to be interacting with Purview. It's not something that you need for everybody, but for the people setting it up, they'll need that higher level of E5 license.
Okay, great. Okay, well now we're just we just sort of moved into questions because we're getting a bunch of different ones that are great. So we'll continue to thank you, Mark, though, for this demo, and we'll continue to ask questions as we move forward. Okay, so we had that. The other one is for organizations who have not enabled Copilot, what features and processes in this demo required Copilot, if any?
Sorry, one more time?
So for organizations who have not enabled Copilot, what features or processes in this demo required Copilot?
Nothing that we did in the demo required Copilot. Copilot is very, very helpful in Purview for finding records and just learning about the system itself. But we didn't do any Copilot stuff for anyone who hasn't enabled Copilot. This is something that I would recommend starting before going down the Copilot path.
Agree. Well, and another question that I think is relevant to what you just said is the question is how do they know if their current record strategy needs an overhaul? What are some of the warning signs?
Yeah, so if your organization finds that finding records is difficult, that's one of those flags, red or otherwise. If you are not sure about who can access what or where everything it is, you definitely want to do that assessment and discovery to find out if records are being stored improperly. Like it's a good step regardless of if you're sure if you need it or not, because that'll help tell you if you need it. Is just doing that assessment and doing that discovery.
Great. Okay. After applying labels to records, can users browse, navigate for records using the labels?
Yes. Oh, that was actually one more thing I wanted to show in the demo. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, well, thank the audience for the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, for sure. Let's see. We want to go to the Data Explorer. Management. And,
Many good questions.
There we go, the Data Explorer. So users can search with just like the built-in M365 search. It is security trimmed, so they'll only be able to see what they're allowed to see. Search and Copilot kind of the same way. They're only going to return things that people have access to. But something more on the admin side that I wanted to show as well is the Data Explorer. This is where you can look at sensitive info types, which we didn't really talk about. It's part of the e-discovery that's built in, where if there is anything mentioned that you choose, in this case, I chose every single one just to show the kinds of data that comes back. So a Japanese physical address might be shown in our tenant 2,628 times. Or a harassment term, or if there's any IP address. So this isn't just for finance records, it can also be for passwords and things like that. It'll dig up any identification numbers, things like that. So from that, you can kind of filter down. And so if I wanted to look at general password stuff, because we definitely don't want anybody storing passwords. There's 46 items found. They're all in SharePoint. And there's a lot of things in here for sensitive info.
So one of the questions that's coming up around this, maybe it says, can it be made required to add a label? Will Word, Excel prompt for one?
Yes, the short answer is yes. Email as well. I think that's important to note that these labels are also can be made available in your Outlook, and you can apply those labels to emails.
Okay, so, and then the policy label stopped the deletion. I assume the label could restrict the access no matter the location?
I would say most locations. It's not going to do very well with physical data with your files. Attaching a label to something that's not a digital asset just won't work. And other than that, like in your digital estate, it includes you can link it up to Salesforce, you can link it up to a few other things as well, not just Microsoft 365 or your file shares, but additional external systems can have their data managed and indexed by Purview.
Okay, and then another label question, and this will be one of the last. Do the labels have functionality or are they just for information? For example, will it automatically delete a file after 7 years?
Yes, you can set it to automatically delete a file after an amount of time. You can set it to change the label after a set amount of time. You can set it to go into a disposition workflow where it needs to get approval after a set amount of time. So pretty limitless with what that action can be, especially with that integration to Power Automate or Flow as it used to be called.
Two more. Will Purview start having any generative AI features capability for Purview automation for labeling?
Sorry, one more time.
Will Purview start having generative AI features capability for Purview automations for labeling?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding the question right, and I could be wrong here, am I still sharing? Perfect. Let's go to records management, and the trainable classifies does kind of that AI thing, and there's also other Microsoft products that are very similar and do that sort of thing with the AI to automatically classify. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of the direction we're going with this question. I'm not sure if we got.
Okay. Oh, we got a thumbs up. So I think we did it. I think we answered it. Thank you.
So yeah,
And
I
then,
can show quickly kind of what these trainable classifiers look like too. We're not going to dive in too far, but see if I can find one that I know has stuff in it, just to kind of show how it works. So this is actuary reports under the trainable classifiers. We can check for matched items, which it says there's 14 of. They're all in SharePoint. And they're not perfect and they will need training, especially because every company structures their documents differently. So it'll have kind of a lower level of confidence when you start, and then you can kind of go into these reports and go through each one and say, yes, you got it right, no, you didn't. And after you do a few rounds of that, then these automatic labels will just start existing.
okay, we have one. Yep, we just have one last question and then we're wrapped up. So let's ask this one question and then we'll wrap it up. But how does because I think this is a great question. How does it handle pre-existing retention policies and record declaration that have been applied at the SharePoint site level? Concerns if labels conflict or policies are duplicated?
That is an excellent question. One that I will have to get back to you on. I
Oh,
haven't really explored the SharePoint, like the old school SharePoint way of doing it, and then the newer Purview. But I believe all of everything was kind of migrated out of SharePoint and into Purview, because you can't access those retention settings in the SharePoint Admin Center anymore. It's all done through the compliance portal in Purview.
got it.
But
So
I would have to double check that. I don't want to say that's a source of truth without being
okay.
100%.
So if the person, I don't have it on my screen, but the person who asked that wants to send our team that question specifically, we'll get back to you individually as a whole. But that's pretty much it for today. As you can see, this is a big topic, and we've absolutely just sort of, as Mark said, hit the surface. The main takeaway we want you to understand is from an Atlanta's perspective, how we help and how we've helped clients thus far is to begin with an assessment. We have had many people come to us with different things they're focused on and different things they're looking to do. And so an assessment is just a very sort of great way to understand current status so we can direct you in the right direction and make sure we prioritize for your company, your business, your teams, exactly where we would recommend for you specifically to go. So that's why we start with an assessment. Different from the one that we're talking about here. It's an Atlantis assessment that we do for our clients to get them started and to support them. So you understand what it is that we are offering. We will be following up with everybody who came today, so you will get an email, or you can contact directly us. Chris is one of the team members that we have that will be working on this specifically, so you might hear from him. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming and being a part of today and being part of our community, and we look forward to continually working with you. If you're interested in what's coming up next, we are doing a M365 maturity webinar. The one thing I will say about this is we've actually had some clients come to us for records management that we ended up starting with an M365 assessment. So they are they do work sometimes hand in hand. But either way, we'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for giving us your time today. So thank you so much. Okay.